a lot of us face. I would have to say most of us face these days is we feel like we're in the dark about something. And so that being in the dark is very scary. And so we come up with these strategies and these survival mechanisms to help us make it, to navigate the darkness. And let's face it, this world is, there's a lot of darkness. And yet there's a lot of light too. And up next after this, you're going to hear a song titled Fear is a Man's Best Friend by John Cale. And so this is kind of leading into that, how these fears that we have actually can help illuminate aspects of ourselves, and we can begin to, how can we love that aspect of ourselves? And it's difficult when we're afraid, but being in the dark about something, not knowing something, right? Not understanding something, not sure how things are going to go. Being in the dark, because when we're not sure how things are going to go, we're out of control. We have no control over a situation. And it's going to bring up fear. And these are the things that I'm talking about. These fears are what actually propel us in our actions. And being able to recognize our automatic. And for a few weeks back, I talked about contrary action, doing the opposite. This is a time to do the opposite. Don't react to your fears to the best of your ability. Sometimes we have to. There's situations that warrant that immediate reaction. I'm talking about these things like when we're in this place of the unknown. How many times does your head go into all the storytelling, making the interpretations of what is actually happening and what are people thinking and blah, 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 blah. That's fear. And when you're in that space, you're in that mental noise, we're not responding appropriately. Years ago, I took what I thought was a self-defense course based in Albuquerque. The teacher's name was Michael Johnson. It was his school. He's probably still down there. He is an amazing teacher, and at the same time, it had nothing to do with self-defense. He used that description because, well, it got attention, right? We're all looking to be able to defend ourselves. But ultimately, when I got into that class, it was all about being proactive. It was about developing a level of awareness where you could anticipate something and you were able to sense when we're in that space of trusting ourselves. Again, I talked about this weeks ago, when we can learn how to trust ourselves and to really develop that ability to hone in on our instincts, our senses. We are at that point are better equipped to defend ourselves, if you will, because we anticipate or we sense, and we are able to respond in a way that is more effective as opposed to reacting. If you're not aware that somebody is stalking you, and the next thing you know is they grab you, you're not prepared. You may or may not swing the winning punch. But if you're more prepared, if you're aware that this person's coming up behind you and they haven't touched you yet, you're in a position to leverage yourself to be able to do something that's more effective as opposed to trying to level this person. Because if they're already grabbing you, you're not in a position to be able to, get them in the throat, get them in the eyes, get them in the groin. You're not in a position to do that. Maybe you are. Maybe you'll be lucky in that regard. But for the most part, it's questionable. But if you're aware that somebody's coming, you're able to duck out of the way, potentially. I was almost in an accident a few years back. I was driving down Cerrillos Road in Santa Fe when it was right along. I had just gotten past 2nd Street, so if you're familiar with that area, it's kind of just the 2 lanes, and we were heading into town, and it was back-to-back traffic. Or it was moving. It was probably going about 35, 40 miles an hour, both lanes, but there was 2 lanes of cars. There was no way to move over, and I saw 3 cars in front of me slam on their brakes, and then boom, first car behind him hit them, then boom, the next car hit him. And had I not seen that happening and aware that there was an alley to my right, because I could not get into the left lane, I would have been in that accident. But I saw it. I was in that space of awareness. I saw it, and I turned right into an alley to get out of the way. And believe it or not, the 2 cars behind me ended up in that accident. I felt guilty. It's like I had just witnessed an accident and got out of it. But that's what, I could, if I'm afraid to drive and I'm afraid of traffic and I'm afraid of getting into an accident, I'm going to be more agitated. I'm going to be, white knuckling it. My mind is going to be so narrowly focused. One of the things I've learned in yoga is if you have a soft focus, so you're aware, but you're also not fixated on something. Because if I hadn't had a softer focus, I wouldn't have been aware of that alley that I could have turned into. It wasn't a street, it was an alley. And I had to get in there, and it had a small parking spot there, and I had to turn around so I could pull back out. But that's what I'm talking about. It's like when we become so afraid, or we are perpetually or habitually afraid of something, of intimacy, or or what could potentially happen, being in the darkness, then we are unable to see those little alleyways to help us maybe get around something. I don't know if that analogy made any sense, but that makes sense to me. While I was listening to this music, the other thing I had come across was actually, believe it or not, an article that was talking about panic attacks and anxiety, and talking about being linked to vitamin deficiencies. And there's a lot of studies around this. And for as real as that seems to be, and we're all running around here so afraid that we're not doing enough for our health, and you have to realize that it's within us. Stress diminishes your vitamins, your minerals, because the body is having to work overtime. And sure, and it disrupts the digestive system, and it's going to perpetuate this inability to properly use nutrients. And there's a number of ways that you can actually do this without having to go to great extremes about having to buy a ton of supplements, because I didn't fully read the article, but I can promise you it's going to sell supplements. There's no reason to go that far. Being afraid of your body's inability to function and being afraid that your body is unhealthy is another factor that we face all the time. And again, like I mentioned, John Cale, the song coming up, is about how fear is a man's best friend. Your fear can actually point you in a direction of love. If nothing else, it's not going to give you the answers to what you need to do, because if you try to fix something because you're so afraid, if you try to shine the light on something because the darkness scares you, being in the dark about something scares you, the light is going to be the love. Can you love yourself through this? Those of us adults, when we're raising our children, we don't scold them for being scared. We love them through it. And so our job is to love ourselves through it. So that's how fear can be your best friend. The idea of being seen, one of the things that DJ Mike B was saying was kind of hold your cards close to your chest. You don't want to necessarily go out there and reveal everything about yourself, because quite frankly, the world isn't safe. Everybody has their shtick right now. The only way to find that safe place is to be willing to make that connection. And it starts with being intimate with yourself, making that connection with yourself, being willing to be vulnerable with yourself. That fear of being alone, loving yourself through that first, then being able to make the connection with somebody else. But this is how we are really going to overcome a lot of those things that ail us, these panic attacks and anxiety issues that so many people, that's what fear is. It's an anxiety. The best way to overcome that is to begin to self-soothe, something that a lot of us maybe never had an opportunity to do when we were infants. Maybe some of us have had so many, traumatic events in our lives that self-soothing has become something that we don't feel like we have. We're afraid we're not allowed to have it. We don't feel like it's ours to experience any longer. And so all of this comes back to, can you love yourself? Can you shine that light in the darkness? Can you be that light in your own darkness? Can you develop that relationship with yourself? Are you willing to develop your relationship with yourself? Are you willing to give yourself permission to be frightened and to love yourself through it all? Because ultimately, that's what we're here to do, is to experience love, but we can't share it with others if we don't have it within us to give it to ourselves. And you do have it. You just have to give yourself permission. You have to be willing to put that guard down. It occurred to me, I've bartended off and on throughout the years. And one of the things that I've witnessed countless times is when we drink alcohol, our inhibitions come down, become more loving. I mean, yes, it does, if it gets to excess, you can spark anger and other in fights and so forth. But when we're first kind of just settling in to having that beer or that glass of wine or that cocktail, you can just see the hackles go down. You can just, and all of a sudden there becomes this, people start to connect. For one thing, they have something in common. They're all sitting around drinking. So that's the one common denominator. And then it becomes increasingly easy to relate to one another. How many times have you been around somebody who's had a lot to drink, and the next thing you know, the next day or a few days later, they're coming around and apologizing for being overly silly or for having done something that maybe might have been inappropriate, but at the same time, it was just their way of expressing themselves at that moment. It may not have been socially acceptable, but it is what they were feeling at that time. And oftentimes we don't give them the grace of just being, it's okay. Other times we do. But it's that vulnerability that's there that many, many people come back and apologize for. We don't need to be apologizing for who we are. And what I wish more than anything else is that we can all find a way to let our hair down, to be able to relax to the degree where we can start being more silly. We can start being a little bit more fluid with one another and around one another, so that we can begin to experience. And again, and even if someone's doing something that we don't like, it's not about being afraid to step away. You don't have to be afraid to step away. If something doesn't match you, if something doesn't align with what you believe in or how you would act or however you want to describe it, it's okay to step away. Again, this comes back to the fear of just being true to ourselves. Can we choose ourselves first and foremost so that we can be authentic? Because that authentic is what's going to create the most amazing experiences and the most amazing relationships. And it's going to create also the most amazing experience of health. And you'll notice that the panic attacks and the anxiety begin to dissipate because the system is stabilized. You won't have to be swallowing handfuls of pills to try to make up for these vitamin deficiencies that people are trying to promote out there. No, this is unnecessary. I was talking to somebody not too long ago about megadosing. This is actually becoming outlawed in some states. There's no need to be swallowing so many pills to try to fix something because we're afraid that our body is failing. The body's not failing. The body is working. If you are above ground, your body's working. It may not be working at the level that you like it, but it is working. Don't be afraid of what it can do and what is happening. Love it. Love yourself. So with that said, I want to remind you all that the Madrid Cultural Projects meeting is coming up on Monday the 5th. And everyone's invited. And that takes place here at the radio station, which, if you are not familiar with where we are located, it's number 10 Rail Yard Lane here in Madrid. just north of the mine shaft. It's open to membership, and meetings are held on the first Monday of every month. And like I said, this coming Monday, the 5th, is our next meeting. Now, I'll let you hear from John Kale. Fear is a man's best friend. You are listening to 96.9 FM, KMRD, LP Madrid, New Mexico, your community radio station. Thank you for tuning in. It's just after 1 here in the Valley.
Stand